Okay, we go ahead and get started. I'm Marcia James. I'm one of the EFMP family support coordinators here at Ramstein Air Base. There are two coordinators. There's also Miss Lily Tarver. I come from Joint Base San Antonio Lackland, and Claire Guidance Center was a phenomenal resource for us there. They offered trainings. They have, if you've been on the sites that I've sent to you in the chat and also in the email, they have numerous guides, free tools, and so much assistance for the Miller community. And I'm so happy that I got a hold of Gerard, and you're going to be able to help us over here at Ramstein as well. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Gerard, and thank you so much for assisting us here.
Thank you, Marcia. We're very honored and grateful to be joining everyone today. I'm actually calling from France, which is my native land, and I'm here for a few weeks. And then Dr. Megan Lawson is joining us from San Antonio. So it's a small world, really, when you think of it. But we're very, very excited to be here for this conversation about a very important topic. And I'm saying it's a conversation because we are going to be, I'm going to be really conversing, interviewing Dr. Lawson on the topic. And then at any time, I want to make sure you all are, feel free to either turn on your mic and ask a question, or put them in the chat box too, if you're more comfortable and it's easier for you. I will be keeping track of the questions in the chat. So this is I want to make sure that everyone is comfortable doing that. Now, I want to add a few words about Clarity. And Clarity is a nonprofit treatment center, as Marcia mentioned, that is located in the medical center in San Antonio. And I'm just sharing some photos here that you could see. We're we're specialized in helping children 3 to 17 with a variety of issues. So we have a hospital, we have inpatient care for kids who are at risk of harm to self and others. We have day treatment, and we also offer outpatient services, including psychological assessment, therapy, counseling, and then medication management in partnership with UT Health. And so we treat about 8,000 kids a year in that center. But as Marcia mentioned, we also are very keen to offer education and information to the community. That's part of our mission, in parts to make sure that access is available, and in parts to also provide our expertise, share our expertise with other professionals in the area. And you can see here this section on our website where you see the little brain here, and all this is content, tons of articles about this topic. We also have a military section there, and it's that we've designed, and this program is actually also supported or done with the support of USAA. And so there is a good number of articles here that are more specific to military life, if you have some questions about this, of course. And so finally, we offer professional education as well with an annual conference, which now is partly virtual, partly in person. And so if you click on the little hat, and if there are professionals, if you know professionals that are looking for continued education, they can find this in our on this page here. It's called Clarity Con, and there are ways, information about previous events, and then there will be updates very soon on upcoming events. So with that said, and I'll come back to that. I'll have a little more information about some of the events that you can participate, knowing that there's a time difference, but some of the events might be accessible to you anyway since they are virtual. But I want to go ahead and introduce Dr. Lawson, and then we'll get started. So Dr. Megan Lawson is a licensed psychologist at Clarity Child Guidance Center. She provides outpatient, individual, and family psychotherapy to children and adolescents and psychological assessments on an outpatient basis. She serves clients with a variety of mental health concerns, runs a trauma-informed group for teens, and specializes in the evaluation of children with neurodevelopmental and autism spectrum disorders. Dr. Lawson completed her doctorate in clinical psychology at Pepperdine University and her undergraduate degree at the University of Texas in Austin. She completed her internship at Bexar County Juvenile Probation Department and her postdoctoral training at Clarity Child Guidance Center before transitioning to staff. Dr. Lawson is a member of Division 7 of the American Psychological Association, the Texas Psychological Association, the Bexar County Psychological Association, and the International Society for Autism and Research. She's passionate about providing quality and effective care to help her clients. Outside work, she enjoys spending time with her family and her children, including our children, and gardening. So if you have questions for Dr. Lawson during the conversation, please don't hesitate to post them in the chat space. So Dr. Lawson, welcome.
Thanks,
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you. It's an honor to be here with all of you. I couldn't have said it better. It's an honor, and I'm very grateful to be here this morning from San Antonio. I know it's afternoon there.
It is very exciting to think of that we can reach people across the world, and especially fellow citizens who serve our country from afar. So thank you for that. Well, our first question is, how has COVID created more stress for families and especially military children?
Yeah, so, you know, in preparing for this presentation, I did a little bit of research, like I always do, in getting ready for these talks. And I was reading an article written by a child psychologist who works specifically with military children at a national medical center. And I was fascinated by the trends that she wrote about, because I think it's very similar to what we're seeing here in our community. And some of my caseload is military children. Some isn't, and some aren't. But what she wrote about was how at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot of referrals coming in for adjustment, anxiety, but overall there was this sense of, this is scary, but it's temporary. And I think a lot of us felt that way. I mean, I remember it was right around spring break. Kids were out of school. It was weird. But we were like, okay, this is going to be a weird month. Like, it's going to be okay. But then it just kept going on. And so then the psychologist wrote about how the referrals started to come in less for the anxiety and adjustment, and what we started to see more and more of as time went on, and things like isolation, winter hit, less kids were outside less, there was more screen time, there was more sleep disruption, and a lot more referrals started coming in for symptoms like lack of motivation, not interested in getting schoolwork done, or not able to focus in virtual school, and irritability, and then overall just more of a sense of depression. So some of the referrals started to shift. There's been an increase in referrals for concerns about ADHD, specifically because a lot of parents started noticing or believing that their kids were having a lot of difficulty with virtual learning. And we've seen that a lot here too. I think it is harder for many kids, especially the younger kids, to do school virtually. So there was a lot of referrals for ADHD concerns. And as far as specific to military children, I mean, they have the added, it was just, everything was exacerbated. So often kids who move for military, sometimes they're moving during the school year, sometimes they, don't have new friends in their new environment, or they have to adjust to new settings. And so there's a sense of uncertainty now at a pandemic. And some of them now aren't even going to be able to go to school and meet new friends in these new places. And so it's even harder. So some of the social supports that are normally really rich and available for military kids, like on base and stuff, were kind of stripped away. And so that was really hard. And so I think it just exacerbated the already present stressors.
Thank you. That's very interesting. It's interesting to see the shift, right, over time for all kids in terms of the concerns. And then, as you said, the context for dealing with the stress of military life really was changed because of that. And we saw that, I mean, just knowing that in San Antonio, about half the kids were only half the children were in school, actually. So meaning that a lot of them couldn't participate in the natural integration that you can imagine. Quick question, Marcia. Are you recording that call? Just because I'm not recording on my end, I'm not sure, since I'm the host, if I'm supposed to record.
I'm recording.
Okay, perfect. Okay, just wanted to make sure. Great. So my next question was, how could you describe, or could you describe how this stress can manifest itself in children? So the stress you just described, the changes, what did, can the parents see as a result of that?
Good question. I always think, whenever I talk with parents and families, I really truly believe parents know their kids best. And so it's so hard to give a general answer for that question, because kids, there are individual differences. And so some kids give us cues and signals that something's off in a different way than another kid. But really, it's about knowing your child and knowing when there's been a shift and a change, and being able to be attuned and understand that that's happened, and then try to figure out why and put it into context. But to give you a general answer, because I know that's important, when we talk about symptoms in children and even in adults, we sort of categorize them into internalizing symptoms and then externalizing symptoms. And so internalizing symptoms are symptoms that are directed, like it sounds, internally. So they're symptoms focused inwards. The suffering is internal. Might not be as easily observable to others on the outside. And so these might be things like anxiety, somatic symptoms, depression, suicidality. Those are more internalizing symptoms. And so what that might look like to an outside observer might be more withdrawal, more isolation, keeping to oneself more. And then on the other hand, there's externalizing symptoms. And these symptoms are usually what we see parents talk about or notice first, because they're externalized. They're visible to the outside, symptoms focused outwards. And so this includes things like aggression, impulsivity, extreme hyperactivity, really reactive emotional expressions. And so we had a lot of referrals for that, and especially teachers, that's what they notice in the classroom, because they're more disruptive. But often what we know as clinicians is when you get into the work, underneath the externalizing symptoms, there's often internal distress. It's just a different way that it's being coped with. And so externalizing symptoms can mask internal distress. And there is some research on sex differences. And of course, I mean, this doesn't apply across the board. But often we see boys are more prone to externalizing behaviors, whereas girls are maybe perhaps more prone to internalizing behaviors. And some of that is, just probably related to socialization. But those are important kind of things to look out for.
And I think it's important to know this, because we've written an article about the one situation that I've learned from talking with military professionals and parents, is that sometimes, because there are so many changes, the parent may not be able to see the changes, especially if they're internalization, and that because it's just like, well, we just changed, so there's a response to the change, and so paying attention to the variety, at least, or the differences in between the way some of those challenges might manifest. And so let's talk a little more about some of the common signs of mental illness. We can there are categories that really those signs are described and can be presented. For example, behavior changes. Let's start with that. What are some of the behavior changes that can be a sign that there is something happening with your child?
Yeah, so behavioral change is one kind of category for a warning sign or warning signals. So if a kid suddenly has a big shift in their behavior, i.e. they're avoiding others, avoiding family and friends, becoming more isolative, becoming much more hyperactive than before, their sleep patterns changing, their eating patterns are changing, any kind of rule breaking, excessive cleaning and or compulsive behaviors, washing, any kind of aggression towards others, animals, fire starting, extreme fatigue, or any increase in, especially adolescents, risk-taking behaviors. Those are some behavior changes that might signal, okay, something's going on.
So you're talking about a change. Now, and what if maybe there is not a, I mean, there was a tendency and then it's become more accentuated too, or it's not necessarily from night and days, I guess you could say, right?
Yeah, it can be just like this kid was already sort of, I mean, a kid was already prone to be a little bit hyperactive, but then it just got turned all the way up and now things are much bigger. A normal part of adolescence is acting out. I mean, teenagers come up against the boundaries of their parents in adolescence often, and that's normal. But when we're talking about it going all the way up or turning up even louder, that's when we need to be concerned.
Yeah, and it's sustained. So there's an event that can cause sadness, and that's normal. But then this is the effect of the event or last too long, maybe, or right?
Yeah. I think we're talking about some of the differences between an adjustment reaction, and I mean, military families especially are so resilient and have so many strengths. And I think a lot of us adjusted to this pandemic with some symptoms that we can talk about, more eating, less sleep, more worrying. But after a few weeks, we sort of utilized our resources and kind of got back on the grind. Some people don't. And when those things continue is when we need to look for more.
So let's talk about mood now. Mood changes is another area. What do we know about mood changes?
Okay, so mood changes can be a little bit trickier to observe because mood is not always easily observable, especially when sometimes mood doesn't match the way others are presenting. People can look pretty happy and feel pretty sad. And so this one, again, it goes back to really knowing your kid and being really attuned to them. But some of this, the mood changes that we would be concerned about if they persist beyond the normal adjustment reaction would be overwhelming sadness, so a lot of tearfulness, extreme fears that seem above and beyond normal, excessive worry about being harmed, excessive worry about hurting others. So this is kind of more of an obsessive pattern that we're seeing, kids constantly wanting to know if they're okay, if they're bad. That would be a concern. Kids no longer enjoying things they used to, so seeming uninterested in playing games when they used to love gaming, or not wanting to play outside when they used to love it. Extreme mood lability, so just big changes in moods that are above and beyond what was previously observed. And then any kind of increase in anger and irritability that persists would signal there's some mood concerns.
Good. And then the last category, or categories, are thought changes and also school changes, right?
Yeah. So thinking changes, those that would be a big concern if there was a big change in thought processes. So one of the things we always observe when we're meeting with kids and families is, what is their thought process like? How grounded in reality are they? So if there's a child who endorses or says they're starting to hear voices, or see things, or their mind is racing and it almost feels like their mind is like a hamster wheel, it's not stopping. their speech is more pressured, if there's any concerns, if they're overly paranoid, difficulties with concentration that are above and beyond what was previously observed, inability to make decisions, or any kind of really peculiar or strange seeming beliefs. Those are big red flags that we need to get treatment quicker. Oh, Gerard, I think, okay.
Yeah, sorry. How about differences between younger children and teenagers? Are there differences in terms of signs?
Yeah, and real quick, I forgot we didn't go over school changes, so I'll go back to that real quick. Yeah,
that's right.
So also another warning sign that something's going on is big changes in school or academic performance. The shift to virtual was hard for a lot of kids, and then also the shift from virtual, if they went back, was hard. And then there's been a lot of back and forth and or hybrid, depending on where you are. We are in a collective trauma, but every country and state even has handled it really differently. So it's been hard on kids academically. So globally, I think we have seen this impact kids academically. That is normal. We expect that. And I think we're going to continue to see the long-term impacts on that for many years to come. But within your own child. So if you suddenly see a decline in grades, your kiddos just stopped really attending class or not engaging in any kind of extracurriculars, refusing to go to school, or an increase in behavioral problems, then those are some warning signs too. But getting to your question about the differences in child and adolescent. So yeah, it does often look different. So younger kids, you're going to see likely, less sophisticated kinds of a presentation. So there might be a lot more somatic complaints or kids complaining about their stomach hurting, their head hurting, and they can't contextualize what's wrong. So they're going to feel it in their bodies. Excessive worrying, extreme disobedience or aggression, frequent fighting, nightmares, severe hyperactivity, changes in their sleeping, eating, and school performance. Those are things you might see in younger kids. Older kids, you're going to see some warning signs might be social withdrawal, risk-taking behaviors, so seeking out things that are not safe and or could be dangerous for them, an increase in irritability and anger. A lot of times depression in teens looks like anger and irritability, suicidal thoughts, self-harm. Adolescence can be the onset of a lot of thought disorders and or other serious mental illnesses. So those things might manifest during this age. Or any time, for both kids, there can be a regression to previous developmental states. So that's kind of a possibility.
What do you mean? Could you explain that?
Yeah, sure. So one of the warning signs we see when kids go through something really hard or something traumatic, and I think we can think about the pandemic as a collective trauma. Mm-hmm. Now, if there's already something else going on for them, what we sometimes see when kids, something's going on and or there's a big warning sign, they might regress. So a teenager might go back to a more childlike state. A child who previously was potty trained might start having accidents again. There's a regression to previous developmental periods. And so that's another warning sign.
And is that something to worry about if it's short term, or it's more something like you see?
I think again, it's if it persists. It's when it persists. If it's extreme, of course, even if it's short term, let's get them in and get them, make sure that we get some other eyes on the kiddo. But if these regressions persist and or they seem above and beyond what a normative adjustment reaction might be, then we need to do something.
So I don't want to alarm anybody, but when would you say it's urgent to seek help? Like you see, this child really needs to see someone in an urgent manner. Can you define that?
Yeah, so I think some of the more urgent warning signs are going to be any expression of wanting to die, suicidality. A lot of parents, I think, and I get it, are scared when their kids say they want to die or they're thinking about that. they don't want to make it a big deal because they think that might make it more real. But what we know is that doesn't make it more real. Talking about these things is important. And so any concerns about suicidality, and of course any concerns about homicidality or really wanting to hurt others, that needs to be immediately addressed. And then also any concerns, what I talked about earlier about the big shifts in thinking or thought processes, those are more concerning. And so if a kiddo is suddenly becoming very disorganized, their thinking appears almost bizarre, then we need to get them seen, or any hallucinations, or those are more urgent.
That's very important for parents to know.
Mm-hmm.
How can parents provide an environment that fosters better mental health during this time? So, assuming that there's nothing really going on, we don't know, but just to support and prevent maybe some tendency or fragility of a child.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think that initially we all kind of got shook with our schedules, and everything kind of had to reacclimate. But hopefully most of us now have kind of gotten into a flow, or what people have been calling the new normal. And it's working for us. But some daily things, so structure is so important for kids and for adolescents and even for us as adults. So I think that some things we can do is to create an environment within our homes to the best of our abilities that mimics some sense of structure. And that needs to be held flexibly, because this is a wild time. We don't want to be rigid about it, but we want to have some structure. So create rituals within your days. Have breakfast together. Get dressed, even if you're attending virtual school or work. Make time to go on a walk. Always do the same bedtime at night. This structure can be really anchoring and containing for kids. And a lot of times when we see kids get better when they go into residential care or any kind of care, it's a big part of it is that they have this structure back. So structure is huge. And maintaining kind of boundaries and rules. Self-care is huge. So kids feel what caregivers feel. And there's this analogy of, like, on the planes, they tell you have to put your own oxygen mask on before you put it on your kid. And that is so true. And so many of us are so focused on being there for our family and being there for kids and our job that we aren't taking care of ourselves, and our kids feel that. And so whatever we need to do, even if it's put a show on for your kid and go breathe or do some yoga or run on the treadmill, whatever it is, do that, because that will create an environment that your kids will feel and will benefit from. Another important thing is really acknowledging the collective trauma. So I am consistently blown away by how resilient kids are and how they can handle some of the most horrific, stressful things if they have a caregiver who's a positive support, and if they have a developmentally appropriate narrative of what's going on. So they need to know what's going on, because they know even when they don't, but if you don't give them a narrative or an understanding, they're going to come to conclusions that may not be helpful, especially depending on their age. So come up as a unit, as a family unit, with what's going on in our world, and why is this going on, and how can we make meaning of this and stay cohesive as a family, find meaning in it, and stay grounded in who we are and what we're doing each day. And then another thing is just to keep the play alive. It's a stressful time, but keep playing. Keep playing with your kid. That looks different when they're teens, but keep the play alive.
Okay, great advice. I wanted also to mention we had, I'm going to send something in the chat that was just a little mention of clarity as the website, but also we just recorded a series of talks, or we had a conversation with Trevor Romain, and some of you are probably very familiar with him. He's a speaker, international speaker, who has spoken to in partnership with USO for the past 12 years to kids throughout the world, thousands and thousands, and parents as well. And so we had the honor to to interview him a few weeks ago, and I'm gonna post a link for you all if you'd like to watch some of the recording, because I think it's really good parenting information as well, to maintain exactly what Dr. Lawson was mentioning, that sense of connection, that communication, the rhythm, sometimes some boundaries as well as some play times, and that's, I think, essential. And I'm sure most military families are already pretty well versed with that, but when things get even more chaotic than usual, it's harder to maintain. So just good reminders. Now, the last question I had, and again, I want to invite anyone who'd like to send a question to do so in the chat. The last question I have was, what about kids who struggle with a diagnosed mental illness, and how can parents support them during this time specifically?
Yeah, good question. That I think this has especially been hard for families who do have kids that struggle with mental illness, and/or adults who struggle with mental illness. So a big part of it is understanding them in context, understanding that this is going to be harder for them because things are harder for them, and now this is more stress. When we see more stress, it often taxes our mental health. So really understanding their diagnosis, what that means, and ways you can kind of bolster and support them at home is going to be huge. Really become involved in their treatment team, I think, is huge. Maintain treatment. It's so much easier to maintain mental health once we've gotten to a place that's more stable than to obtain it. So it's better to just keep maintenance therapy or maintenance treatment going. If you find some interventions that work, keep them in place, because it's hard once kids kind of fall back or a crisis comes up again to get back to that state. So maintain appointments, bolster supports, take care of yourself. Again, I mentioned that earlier, but that's huge. It can be so difficult to parent a child with mental health concerns. So take really good care of yourself. There are often parent groups, they might be virtual right now, but join some kind of support system where you can really process how you're feeling and how you're doing, so that you can go back home to your kid and be there for them. Let's see, yeah, and find other families who also struggle. I mean, I think mental illness, especially when it's our kids, can feel so isolating. But what we know, I mean, the whole 1 in 5 Minds campaign is about 1 in 5 kids could be diagnosed with a mental illness. So you're not alone. So find the others who are in the same position, so it doesn't feel so isolating for you or your child. And then some basic things like sleeping, eating well, exercising. Those are always good things too. I mean, they're the basics, but they're like the most important daily habits that can keep things going well.
Sorry, I have a phone that's ringing. It's not going to last.
Oh, no, it's okay. Yeah. And I guess another really important thing, obviously, if you have a kid at home who is struggling with mental health, it's really important to keep dangerous items out of the home. So sharps, lethal, anything lethal.
Yeah. A couple of thoughts. So one thing I was thinking about the engaging in treatment, and for military family, what I've learned is that because you have lots of shifts and changes, continuity is not always easy, right? And so making sure that when you move, you're gonna find, and I've heard families say, what we do is before we go to a PCS somewhere else, we're gonna prepare and talk to the local contacts to find some appropriate services there. And we have articles about that, by the way, on our website. And the big thing I hear, and maybe Dr. Lawson, you can confirm that, is how you choose a local provider can be very important. And, can you comment that about, okay, so now you're PCSing to back to San Antonio, or it could be somewhere else in the state. How do you? Where else? Some recommendations about finding the proper provider.
Yeah, that is a tough obstacle for a lot of families who relocate frequently. Some of the military families I've worked with are the best advocates. And I think part of that is because they've developed this skill through experience. And so I do think it's critical to find a good fit. So the more you learn and know and are attuned to your kid and get involved in treatment, you're going to understand better what it is that they need. And so when you go to a new place, it will be really critical to advocate for the services that you know that they need. And therapy and or providers, those are relationships. And just like any human relationship, the fit really matters. And so I really feel for people who think that they have to settle for the first provider that they see, because that's not the case. It's okay to advocate and to say, you know what, this isn't working for us, we need something else. And working with your team to kind of find the right fit. So keep looking until you find a fit. And I think whenever possible, and I know it's not always possible, but if you have some warning that a move is coming, do the research beforehand. Ask your current provider if you trust, like hopefully someone you trust and you like, what is it that I should be looking for? Do you know anybody in this area? And try to kind of work to figure out what the next step is before you get there.
Right. Now, the other part I was interested in, that you mentioned, is the support. And there is I'm sure many of you are familiar with the National Alliance for Mental Illness, NAMI, and they even have actually now a program specific to military families. So that's a great place to find support groups, to find educational groups that help. So you can look up, I think it's NAMI.org or National Alliance for Mental Illness, and find their services. I don't know if they're outside the U.S., but I know they're in many cities in the U.S. They have a pretty strong group in San Antonio. But now, as you said, because the virtual access to services is so broad, you can probably find some groups that are meeting. It is very important. Unfortunately, when you deal with you have a child who has a mental illness, not everybody understands, and parents who have the same experience are very valuable support, or can provide very valuable support and understanding, because you can find yourself very isolated. Any other, Dr. Lawson, any other thoughts that you'd like to add? And then we're gonna turn it over to the audience for questions.
I think we can go towards questions, and then I know that you've provided the resources for our site. There's a wealth of information, so please use us as a resource. Questions, comments?
Well, there was a question actually. There was a question. I'm sorry.
I have a question. So from your list of symptoms and stuff, I really think that my 10-year-old daughter is really suffering from depression. She does the withdrawal. She's living in a fantasy world. We've been doing virtual school for a while because my son is high risk, and my kids basically failed virtual school, so I pulled them out and we're doing homeschooling. But we're getting ready to PCS this summer, and I know that they're starting to do a vaccine for the kids hopefully soon. How much should I seek treatment now for her, and how much is just the change of us moving, of them going back to school, and the world opening up? Yeah, how urgently do I need to seek care for her versus just waiting until it gets better?
Yeah, that's always kind of the question, right? That's a really difficult, it's a difficult question without knowing more about her and the family and what's going on. But I think that getting help early is often safe and better if there is that opportunity. These are stressful times. All this added stress may make it harder. And so getting something set up, even if it is telehealth or virtual therapy, somebody to talk to about all of these shifts could be helpful in the transition. Or just consulting with a licensed psychologist or therapist to really understand, is this above, like, here's my kiddo, here's what's going on, what do you think? And I've had a lot of families come in with those kinds of consults. And so at the end of about an hour of talking with the whole family, I can usually give my opinion on, you know what, I think we should probably get something out, or let's keep monitoring. But then if this or this comes up, we really need to get them in sooner. So I think getting some kind of consultation may be the best option.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good question. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Lawson. I unfortunately don't have a camera, but my name is Jamie Summers, and I'm actually the special needs coordinator for the medical portion of the Exceptional Family Member Program. So for EFMP Medical, I'm a medical social worker here at Ramstein, and my reach goes outside of Ramstein. It goes to 166 geographically separated units, so a lot of military families living overseas. And I love the mom that just got on and asked that question. That's an excellent question. I just wanted to put something else out for everyone, and I think you guys are doing a great job. This presentation is far surpassed what I was hoping it would be, so I'm so glad that Marcia recorded this. So I'm the medical side that supports what Marcia does. But what I wanted to point out for military families, what can be a super big struggle over here. You had wonderful things to say and recommendations, the best, but we don't have a lot of options. So oftentimes, and I'm honest, Jamie, that's who I am. I just say it before people even can tell me to slow down. But one of our big struggles here is that we are often trying to put a Band-Aid on something after something has gotten bad, because there's a common rumor that isn't always true. So I would encourage that mom and every mom to get with your PCM, because the PCM will write referrals, and there are providers that can see our clients that are already established here. And if nothing else, they can, even just a PCM, that's primary care provider, sorry, I have to watch my acronyms, even just the pediatrician or family doctor taking care of that child can annotate whatever need might be required or might be requested by the family if they want. If this child or another child isn't already engaged in care, isn't getting care right now, then it doesn't have to go on there. But they don't just have to put information down about what they're already getting. They can also put on a special form. So I don't know how much you two are aware of this, but military families are always moving. They're getting ready to move, or they're trying to settle in for a move, and then they're finding out that they're moving again. And when they move, the Air Force, and I'm sorry to butt in, but if the Air Force has a really special program, and so do all the departments of the military, where in the process of the family moving, they will pre-screen the family and reach out to the base that the family has planned to go to and let them know a package of what this family requires. And they can get the answer before they accept that assignment as to whether or not that base is going to have proposed services. And so it does not stop any assignment. What it does is it lets the family members know if that care will be at the next base. So anytime I hear anything like that from a family and they're trying to decide, I was in the same boat. I'm a civilian provider now, but I was active duty and a dependent myself. Do we really need this physical therapy? It was just a little injury, or can we wait till our next base, kind of a thing. That's a common thing, and we're all going to be going through that all the time. But even if you can't engage in care, I would hate for an Air Force family at least not to know in the back of their heads, and most of them will get this when it comes time to PCS anyways, because their sponsors are getting it. But just for whoever's on here, you can get your PCM to get that information down. And I do not like to diss bases. We have wonderful bases in the Air Force, but there are some bases that have a plethora of services and other bases that we already know it's going to be a struggle for the family going there. And I would hate to have a family not realize that they have the opportunity to get that down on paperwork, even with like a pediatrician. Hey, this child has been struggling, and we'd be looking to make sure that they had this option at the next base. And I'll stop now.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful information.
Yeah, thank you. Very good. There was a question from Shane Stank. Do we practice Dr. Ross Green's CPS at Clarity? Yes, we do. I was surprised to see someone knows about this. It's basically an approach of care, right? And maybe Dr. Lawson, you can comment more on that. How we help kids at Clarity and inpatient specifically.
Yeah, that is a great question. We love Ross Green here at Clarity, and I love the CPS he was talking about. Stands for, that acronym is always kind of funny, but stands for Collaborative Problem Solving. And so, yes, that's a model we really like. We are really big on involving the kid and collaborating with the kid in treatment, and really honoring what's going on for them. And so that definitely that fits who we are, and we really like him. So I encourage everyone else, if you're not familiar with Ross Green, to check him out, and in particular the collaborative problem solving model.
And I think it's to me, there's one aspect of it, and I'm a parent, so I know I have adult kids, but the challenge with mental illness is that about 50% of mental illness starts, the onset of the mental illness for adults is when they are 14 and around 14 years old. So actually, that is something to keep in mind, is that the way you approach and you connect with your child and you engage him will be lasting, because once your child is an adult, your ability to help the child as an adult is much more limited. Right? You basically you lose all the control by law, and so if you have a relationship where you've already engaged your child about some of their needs, and the fact that therapy is important, the fact that maybe if the child needs medication, it's really important for their success, for their functioning, that is very, very valuable, because it will be much harder to implement. And we see a lot of kids, they are struggling, but then they go to college and things get, because there is so much stress, things get very, very difficult. And so taking action earlier, having this support early is good if you see the need. Not, obviously it's not always needed happily, but if you see the need, it's important. Other questions? It looks like we probably covered all the information that needed to be covered. I wanted to give one more piece of information, a couple of things. One, as I mentioned in the chat, we have an e-newsletter. You can sign up if you go on our website, and this is an e-news that goes out once a month, provides information about new articles or events that are coming up. And it's if you look at the bottom of the website, I think it says here, receive a newsletter, right? So you can click there and then enter your email address, and you will be able to see that, to get the e-news. We also have events on a regular basis. So if you look at claritycgc.org/events, there's a calendar there, and you can see upcoming events that you can join. We've been doing parents chat, so those are pretty well. Actually, it's actually a reasonable time in Germany. They're usually about 11:30 a.m. in U.S. times, which makes it 18:30, so 6:30 p.m. here. And so we cover a number of topics on a regular basis that are discussed with our professionals. So again, lots of information. Thank you so much for joining us today, and email us and if you have any more need for information, and best wishes to you. I see in France, at least, the strict COVID restrictions are getting released slowly. They're much stricter than we had in the US, or at least in Texas, and it's good that things are getting better, and I hope it's the same in Germany.
Yes, thank you all, and thank you all for your service.
Marcia, back to you.
And I will get a hold of all the information that he said. I wrote it down, and I'll send it out in a mass email to everybody. And again, they're very approachable. So if you have anything that you think about after, just email me, and I'll get you connected. And if you have another question that came up, so.
Marcia, this is Jamie again.
Okay.
This is Jamie again. Look at me speaking again. I just have to say, back to, I'm the special needs coordinator for the medical side. I really want to thank you too. I don't think you really can fathom what a blessing this is to our community, because we have wonderful providers in the military, but in the overseas environment, it is driven by regulation. They are number one here for the active duty members, and even if it's set up so that of course they can assist family members that are here, but with what you've been talking about with COVID, we are overrun, we are overdone. It is crazy. So there is not as much of an education piece, of an outreach, a chance to get on a chat, groups. If you think about what happens stateside, we take for granted at stateside bases that they have the supports of a local community and everything that the United States has. And the overseas, the other countries do not set up their health care or their government that way. And so we don't have any city, state mental health supports, and we don't have organizations like yours. So I'm going to stop because I think we're coming to an end, but I just can't thank you enough. This is so important and so special. And the fact that we have it recorded, we're going to go on a big event now in the EFMP Medical to make sure we're getting this out to everybody, the recording too. So thank you again.
Welcome. Great to be here.
All right, well, signing off, and thank you very much. And please do get on those websites that we sent you. Numerous guides. I mean, lots of information, lots of assistance. So, and thank you again, Gerard and Megan. And yeah, it does mean an awful lot to us over here. Okay, everybody have a good evening or a good morning. Thank you.